Hey everyone, welcome to another Infinite Green Talk. Today we've got myself and John Blum talking about AI. What is fact, what is fiction, and what is future? So there seems to
What
be
is AI? What the
what
hell is AI? Jesus.
it's that little thing you ask to time your cooking up in your kitchen.
Or
Set
is
the
it
timer.
Al? Is it AI or is it Al? Because I don't know Al. I need to know Al.
Capital A, capital I. Anyway, so we hear a lot about AI, and everyone's talking about AI and how it's going to impact their business, how it impacts their lives personally, how many data centers we're going to need as a country, how it overpowers the grid, blah blah blah. So we wanted to, from a view from the cheap seats, if you will, from our perspective, we get asked a lot from companies. How should I be thinking about AI? What should I be doing about it, and where is it going to add value in the short term and long term? I think that kind of sums it up. I think people are playing with it. I think individuals are dabbling with it at companies, finding some interesting ways to use it. But I still think it's very targeted to developers. And it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it a mainstream capability quite yet, but it's on the verge.
Yeah, but if you break it down to probably it's like I don't know, if you do like five or six, like what are the top five or six things about AI? Why is the AI so impactful today? If you think about it, it is breakthrough technology, right? It is like the cutting edge, or at least drives the philosophy or thought that there is cutting edge out there that we just don't know enough about. But it's like machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, like, again, the broadest sense of the term. AI is like the not just the shepherd that brings you along the way, but it's like the jump, and then people will come into it, right? I think that's the big part about from a technology standpoint that we don't know yet. Like there's a lot of unknown there, but there's still, you know, that level of optimism and opportunity. I think it's an explosion of data, right? The world's generating more data than ever. To your point, how many data centers do you need in the world? When do we hit that? Like, there's too many data centers or too much data, right? Before giving kind of AI enough of the fuel to go, hey, I'm going to look back 20 years on a conversation that you had, and I'm going to use it. I think the computing power, like the GPUs, if you want to call it that, right? Cloud computing is a huge part of the future. And I'm assuming AI, the chip makers are going to be making AI driven chips, right? Going
Yeah.
forward, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to have to do that from a speed, a throughput, a context. Graphics used to be like the flip, right? It was either info or it was graphics. And now it's like AI is going to drive a lot of that manufacturing piece differently. I think some of the real world applications around, healthcare and finance and industry around big sets of data that you need to analyze and take action on. I think that's a big piece of it. I think the access and in open source tools for generative AI to help you get started down a path, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you want to call it, Gemini, gives you the ability to kind of, again, move faster into the, okay, now I really need to be able to do something with it. But startups, think about how much more startup companies are going to be able to do faster without like a lot of the investment or capital or humans that they needed to do to get a concept from, dream to reality. And then the last piece I think in just general is businesses and us as consumers we're going to generate more kind of growing demand around that, right? So I think that's where AI, in a general sense of the term, is going to be impactful. I don't think it has to be like the end all be all at this point, but I do think that it drives that optimism. But it starts with, man, we're way out here, and how are we going to flow into that? TBD, right?
Yeah. Let's start with facts about 2006, what AI can do and what it can't do in 2006. We just got back from a tech conference where we saw
2026 or 2006.
2006, 2026. This
We
year,
were we were at Best Buy in
2026.
2006, and we had no
Oh
idea what
boy,
AI was at that point, but
oh boy, it's evolved a little bit since then.
just a bit.
But we saw, tools that are starting. to leverage agentic workflows where you basically don't need programming to create automations, right? You can develop a prompt. As long as you're good at developing prompts, you could basically create an experience and create an automation without any coding background or whatsoever, right? We saw that in practice. And so I think people are putting that into the agentic stuff into tools now that allow you to design a CX experience, a process automation experience, a coding experience, a reporting experience, whatever that might be, with prompting. Now, prompting, one thing we do see a lot and hear a lot, observe a lot, is that prompting is a way different skill set than search. So everyone's been trained to do search on Google, using very few words, summarize something you want to see or read about or learn about, and they've learned to Google it, right? And that's not the same as prompting. Prompting requires a little bit more thoughtfulness in terms of you have to tell it not only what to do, what you want it to do, but some conditions around it, whether that's a timeline, an organizational design, a process design, a certain set of data that you want to see, things that you might want to exclude, those kinds of things. And that's different than searching. And so I think that's a skill that that companies need to train their people on if they want to have them take advantage of AI capabilities in the future. But that's something that's here and now.
All right. So do you think prompting is going to be the new verb of 2027? Like Googling was in whatever, 15, 20 years ago? Or, I mean, prompting is, I agree with you on that. I think where it hits reality is, and maybe the way that I interpret it, maybe the same way, but just in a little bit of a different spin, is so practically speaking, if I'm on Claude or if I'm on ChatGPT, okay, I can say, show me this so that I can do this and then make it happen this way, all in one string, right?
Yep.
So really that's what you're talking about, right? Is don't just go, where should I find the next restaurant? But where should I find the next restaurant? Give me ones that fit an Italian bistro mix, and then book a reservation for me on Friday at 5, anywhere between 5 and 7 o'clock. That to me is like, that's the practical side of what you're talking about, right?
Yep. I think there's two levels. One is the prompting side, which is kind of a single use prompt, right? Give me this, this, and this, but not this. And I can probably hone in on this, and I can
Right.
ask it another couple of questions, and great. And your product at the end of that is done. Now there's the agent side of agentic workflows that you tell it that you want it to act as somebody, on behalf of the organization, to do a whole bunch of things on its own.
Right.
And that's where, I think prompting and developing agents to do your work, those two things together are going to add, those things are going to add value to companies.
It really blends what the industry terms as generative and agentic in one flow, right? If you want to call it that, right? Generative is, how do I Google things in the new world, right, of AI?
Yeah.
Agentic is, what kind of action can I take from that, and how can I get it to do something with the prompt or the input that you've given it, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's even gray areas in generative and agentic that I don't think the whole world, and again, I don't claim to be an expert. I just think those terms get thrown around really, really loosely, instead of, here's where generative stops and here's where agentic starts. But those are mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
Yeah,
right?
practically they're mostly the same thing with some nuance.
Practically, they're mostly. I love that. Which is true, though. You're absolutely right. It's just funny how that gray area can cause, on the front end of a conversation or even on a practical piece of work that you're trying to do, that can change the trajectory of how you get there, or can throw you out into left field, and you'll be like, okay, now I'm just gonna draw a picture because it's easier. I mean,
Yeah, something in the back of my mind on agents that I've been thinking about is between insurance providers, insurance
yeah,
carriers, and actually healthcare providers. So if you think about if each side sets up an agent to process claims and to approve or deny claims and to reject claims and to challenge claims, these
yeah,
agents, after watching behaviors of a human over time, can actually start negotiating with themselves on their own. Should I approve this? Should I approve this? If it wasn't approved, what does the healthcare organization need to provide to approve it? And they could sit there and talk to each other as agents, right?
yeah.
And they could do that in terms of minutes instead of 90-day cycles, which is
So for
what it
healthcare,
seems to be these days.
how does that work?
Yeah.
Is it okay? I've got approvals, I've got denials, so I've got two different sets of inputs here, or two agents.
Or I need more information somewhere in between.
Right, two agents, but what that approval denial piece might be, all right, does it fit in the HMO plan? Are they paying for that in the right way? But even on the other side of that, like how well did our stock performance hit earlier today? Is it something that we should be allowing today, but maybe not tomorrow? Is this just a good time? Almost like buying a car at the end of the month. Like, am I going to hit the sales guy the right time so I get the best price? Or what do you think about that? Like,
Should we let the system do it, or should humans be involved?
right? I mean, is that
If
kick
I'm
it
a
out?
provider and I'm trying to maximize my revenue,
Right.
right? And the healthcare companies are trying to minimize what they pay out, right? Those two conditions.
Well, not just healthcare. Every insurance company is doing that.
AI is going to learn how to submit a claim to maximize its revenue, and the healthcare companies are going to set up agents that are going to maximize the amount of revenue they keep.
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to continue to adapt. And so I think that's kind of a fascinating use of agents in the mix. And that's where it's going to go. So the human relevancy in making some of those decisions is going to be a monitoring activity, not a direct activity.
Yeah. Let's go back to when we were in Channel Partners in Vegas last week. We saw a really good toolkit, like on a communications platform, from one of our partners that was able to open up the opportunity for someone who's a novice but understands their business process really well, how to build an agent.
Yeah.
What did you think about that? Like when we walked through that, it was very elementary in how I needed to think about it. Still had a little bit of the code issue, like, do I know it or not know it? But the ability to voice over some of that stuff and have it generate into code. Like, what did you think about that when we saw it?
Yeah, I think with agentic, now that you don't have to program every nuance of a communication, of a dialogue, right? It knows how to have a conversation. How does it know that? It's got all these huge large language models back there, and it's seen these conversations take place in your industry, not just any industry, but in your industry specifically about the products and services that you might sell, has all that context.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is say, hey, look, customers are going to be calling in about statuses of orders.
Mm-hmm.
They might be calling about when's this product going to be available? My bill was incorrect, stuff like that. So I need you to do a couple of things when the customer calls in around, and you're just typing out a paragraph of text about contextually who my customers are and how they interact with our company. And this is what I want you to do around billing, right? You don't have to tell it all the nuances of billing. Right. It'll know. It knows what an invoice looks like. It knows what your bills look like. You can actually upload a couple of bills into the large language model of yours so it knows. Yep. You don't have to do any of that. You can just basically state, here are some conditions that I want you to follow when the customer asks any question about our company. Yeah. And that part of it, and it will take care of the rest. So in my opinion, 99% of it's done. All you have to do is give it some nuance and give it some character, give it some things to think about, and to kind of direct it a couple of times, and it's going to take it from there. And that is so different than what it was 5.3 a year ago.
Yeah, a little shout out to Perry Price on his application of Quibi. QWIBIE, I believe is the spelling of it. But I love the fact. So think about the startup conversation we just had. Think about the agentic, take the next action, loading in things. So Quibi is great because you can load in your business laws, your kind of business structure, your norms, and it helps you build a board voting, board decision making platform around it, right? And it allows this asynchronous, so meaning you don't have to be on a board meeting to be in the board meeting, right? And I think that just, to me, practically speaking, for companies that have to assemble a board meeting or even just general business meetings, you could do a lot of this stuff again, not so that you take people out of the mix, but that you bring people into the mix and you're able to do more with what they're bringing to the table. Like my expertise might be in operational reporting in a call center. Yours might be the technology footprint on how to get there. And the CEO of a different company or whatever might be on the board and driving direction and vision. And all of those put together you might have different points of view, which you will, but we don't have to get in a room and talk through all these things contextually. Now, the community around that is different, right? So the community aspects of having a conversation should still be there. But in the end, when it gets down to let's synthesize all the information that people talked about over the course of these conference calls and whatever, and this is the relevant information. Think about how good that would be in government. Think about how good that would be at any other company. And I think Perry is really driving an interesting model with Quibi that could extend beyond that, but really makes it more practical. And to your point, you don't have to know coding and you don't have to know some of those other things.
And you don't have to know legal. You don't have to know communication structure. You don't have to know what's legal, what's illegal. It's going to know that based on documentation.
Kind of like what we talked about with the insurance thing, right? It's like you don't necessarily have to know, all right, what's our risk tolerance to approve this particular GLP-1 med because we don't have it in there, but they're in a gray area. So if we're doing well now, maybe we will. And then that gets back to the ethical conversation, right? Is if there's a gray area and you get it, but I don't, and I find that out, how does that get reconciled? Right.
Yeah. Are claims better processed by humans or computers? Is it a systemic decision or is it an emotional one?
Well, as I found out with my house after dealing 4 years and a number of different adjusters, that it's more emotional than it is. Well, I'll say it's probably both, but it's the what is it that you can attract more bees to honey than you can. I don't know whatever that term is, but basically being nice to somebody and finding somebody that's willing to advocate for you today personally could be much easier said in a much more understandable T's and C's when you buy an insurance policy. So you know exactly what your range is and what it isn't, but you don't have to learn it and know it to know exactly how your claim is going to be processed. Right.
Right. So let's switch gears a little bit to fiction. What isn't AI? Because people think AI has a consciousness. People think AI has a soul, right? And it might behave in a manner that might look like a human interaction, right? It might learn from a whole bunch of interactions, emotional interactions from large language models and other logic that it might have, and it might sound like it has a soul, but it can't think on its own. In the practical term of thinking, it's processing, right? It's processing a bunch of logic that it knows, a bunch of logic and information that it has, and it's spitting out based on millions and millions of interactions that it sees online, or Shakespeare, or whatever library of data it has. It has the entire human existence on paper in its library, if you will, right? So it knows all of these things, and it might sound human, but I think people think that it's making leaps in data when it might not be, right? It doesn't have a consciousness per se.
No, but it can show empathy because it understands. In this particular case, it can give you empathetic responses. But to your point, it doesn't come from a space of empathy first. It comes from a space of, well, in these situations, I can give them a logical, or I can give them an emotional, or a little bit of something in between. And if it knows you and knows how you're wired, like you and I might need something different if one of our family members passes away. Or if you think about, unfortunately, and this is something I'd love to dig into deeper on a separate call with like a psychologist or psychiatrist. But why are suicides up? Why is it that there isn't more information? And to me, again, I know that it's that there's a whole bunch to unpack there. But if you use what we're calling AI to intervene in certain cases, right? There's suicide hotlines. There are things that you need to talk to a person with, but are there things that we could do proactively with humans? Like, oh, I noticed that you searched best ways of taking your own life. And I know it's a heavy topic, but in all reality, like, why aren't we using some of this to better understand and be proactive? And that's the stuff that I want to see more of it.
As it identifies patterns in people's behavior.
Right. I
Yeah,
mean, because
sure.
how do you, if you're consuming all of that information, and back to our data conversation, how much data is too much? How much do you look back on and go 20 years back or 10 years back or 15 years back because you can load it in? Or you and I have been on LinkedIn for 20 years. We were some of the first, we were there. There were less than 1 million members on LinkedIn when I started, and you and I were on there pretty quickly, pretty much at the same time. But think about all the business behavior and patternal behavior that I don't see generating other than the algorithm that pushes content to my feed. But now the follow and some of the other things, right, that drives that. But that data is there in
Yeah.
long term. How do we use that to lift up the human side of it without it being like, again, data from Star Trek and have a neural network and can actually think and breathe and believe on its own?
Yeah, I think, that gets to another good fiction point that AI is always right, which is
Right.
there's still they call it hallucinations in the data, right? I call it just, it's trying to make leaps so it learns, right? If I make a leap and I'm wrong
Yeah.
and someone tells them I'm wrong, well, because I have to tell it it's wrong if it makes the leap, because otherwise it won't learn. I think there's always going to be, it's always going to try to fill in gaps in the data, gaps in things, and that's not 100%. It's never going to be 100% accurate. So I think, if in terms of what it doesn't do, you still have to have human review to make sure it's not
Well,
trying to make leaps in your, especially if it's a legal issue or something like that, making sure that you're reviewing that.
this
But
is nothing new though, really. I mean, in all reality, like, this is how Wikipedia came to light, right? Where is there a place where you can weigh in? I mean, if I say no, that's not true, but it is true.
if you write it enough, like let's say the moon is made out of cheese, right?
Right.
And it's written in stories that the moon is made out of cheese, right? Fairy tales and other things.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if enough people say it, does it become true? And Wiki is no different. Wiki is edited by people, right? Well, if 10,000 people go on and say it's not made of cheese, you dipshit, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's going to learn from that, but it gets to a point where the data, is all about what was written, right? And the more people that write about it, AI might think it might be true, even though there's no truth to it. It doesn't know what's true and what's not true. It only knows what someone told it is true.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the fiction comes in.
But if
Now,
you take that one little step further, like, I can go on to Wiki. Let's say you're in an interview and you paid me to go onto Wiki at a specific time and input all of these crazy things that you did. You graduated from Harvard, you did all this stuff, which you haven't, but all that thing. And I do it at the time, and then you have whoever's interviewing you pull up your Wiki, right?
yeah,
And then the next day it could be gone. But the way that AI might work within that is, well, this was just edited 20 seconds ago. This was just added. This was just removed. Right? Those are the things where, again, you can use that for validation. You can use it for fact checking.
yeah.
You can use it for good versus evil, again, generally speaking. But to your point, it's the same thing that we've been doing in written or in more face-to-face formats for years and years and years. It's just like saying AI is really not automation more than if-then statements, nested in an Excel file or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It is when you move from the generative side to the agentic side, right? What action do I take without having to program it?
Yeah.
Right.
And what's interesting about how it's evolved. So people thought that I had this argument with somebody when my kids were in high school about if Wikipedia is a good referenceable document.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the point I was trying to make was, well, you had Webster Dictionary and Webster and now who's the Encyclopedia Britannica publishing like a set of people,
Yeah.
a small set of people creating content about
Yeah.
history, let's say, or about topics or science or whatever the topic is.
Yeah.
And it's 50 people in a room creating this content. Now they do research and they validate and they try to do as much as truth as possible, but it's those 50 people
Right.
aggregating a whole bunch of stuff from what they think is the truth.
Right.
And then you get to Wikipedia, which is okay, now you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people course correcting what they think is the truth.
Yep.
And it's trying to narrow down what is real, right? What is the most fictitious or the most fact-based pieces of information based on millions of people's input. Well, now you've got the globe of anything printed as a reference point, right? So now we've expanded it to human knowledge for 200 years or longer.
Right.
Right? Is it could we still be wrong? Well,
at least how it's written, right? Yeah.
Right, because every day something else evolves. Something in science
Right.
learns something new about something, right? So it's got to evolve. But I think it's the fastest evolving thing that our society has ever seen. So let's go to, in a few minutes left, let's go to future. What do we think AI is going to be in the next couple of years? And from what I've seen with agentic, it's changing significantly faster in terms of if I can prompt it to do something, it has so much more context than it did 6 months ago or a year ago, that if I want to code something, automate something, design something, it can do it X number of beats faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why everyone's racing to get data centers built and other ways to do computing. But we're going to get to a point where I think it's going to be over processing things. It's going to try to find a way to optimize processing power.
Yeah.
Right. So although the prompting is going to get easier and better and easier to use over time, the amount of noise going through the system is going to have to be more created. There has to be some efficiencies created in how it's doing it. It can't just be massive amounts of data being pushed back and forth all the time. It's going to have to start narrowing those down. And of course, there's going to be a market for tools that narrow all that stuff down to make these prompts more efficient than they are today.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the software industry is going and the hardware industry is going, is how do we make these large searches, prompts, and automations way more efficient than because if I'm using a token every time I'm looking something up for a customer and it costs me 3 cents as an example. Well, if I don't write an efficient prompt, it might hit 100 tokens on something I'm doing that I only want it to do 1 or 2. Right. So it's going to be more of the who can create the most elegant design to use the least amount of AI resources as possible, because it'll probably be a barrier if this continues.
Yeah.
And states and cities and even Elon Musk's like, I'll put data centers in space, right? Because it takes so much power to run these things. It's going to become a barrier for what the software is going to be able to do.
And most of the power is to cool and keep it temperature contained, right?
Yep.
So is it fair to say that we should teach the young kids how to prompt, or they're going to teach us how they should prompt, and it's going to evolve from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, can I just ask it, some very basic things, and it's going to just make leaps
Right.
in what it thinks I might want to get out of it, right?
I remember her, my oldest daughter, Hallie, when she got her first phone, and her first mobile phone. And she went in and wanted to see how all of it was put together and how all of it worked, and curious enough, right? And she changed her screen, and she changed the colors, and she changed whatever she could change on there to make her own. She did. And I don't remember how old she was, maybe 10 or 11 or something like that. But I just remember the no barrier side of the world right now with kids that are growing up. Like, you and I have to reprogram ourselves. The business community that we talk to, for the most part, most of us that have been around a few years, have had to reprogram ourselves into how we look at capabilities and how we look at technology. And being able to separate yourself from the way that you learned, like it's like old math versus new math. Like I loved old math. I don't know that I would love new math, but yeah, do you get to the same output? Do people learn the same way these days? No, there's a lot more videos out there. There's a lot more visual. And where does that come in to the whole mix of information? And I think we've got to let the kids, I think getting kids involved earlier in how AI actually can work and work for good is probably worth another conversation.
Yeah, infinite knowledge. What do you do with infinite knowledge?
Infinite
Right?
green, infinite knowledge, infinite craziness,
Well,
infinite
cool.
challenges, infinite opportunities, whatever you want to call it.
Well, we hit 30 again. If you want to talk to us, we've been doing a lot of AI discovery work and use case development work for companies. If you want to meet with us and learn how we approach that, if you think your company's in a position where there's opportunities, but you don't know how to take advantage of it, go ahead and click or scan the Meet QR code up there. Schedule a meeting with us so we can talk through it. I promise we're not going to be as heady in day-to-day conversation. Maybe I can't promise that, but
I can't promise that.
We'd love to talk to you about it. We get so jazzed about trying to help companies through some of these technology waves, if you will. And this is just another one of those. So thanks for listening.
We have a lot of practical solutions that we've built for companies. So again, it's not that we don't have that, but I think the conversation, opening it up. So thanks for putting this together, Scott. I think making it accessible, starting to talk through that, educating along the way and where you should focus, and maybe where you can let others focus for you, I think is just a good part of how all of this conversation becomes much more palatable, real, and not so crazy, right? Yeah. We're never going to, I mean, you and I talked about this, probably a couple weeks ago. We're never going to be 100% in the know on the best applications for the best use cases. It's never going to be that way. So going in with a preset kind of notion of what's going to work for a company, yeah, we can get to a starting point and we know how to ask the right questions to get to what platform, what solution, what point solution that you already have, what new we need to bring in to get you further down the road faster. We know how to do all that, but to be knowledgeable in every particular area of AI and to be able to practically apply it to every business out there, I don't know that there's ever going to be a person that's knowledgeable enough. It'll be AI will have to help us with that, right? Yep. So I think that's the piece that we aren't afraid to jump into something that we don't know about and to really figure it out the best way for our clients. And that's how we've been doing AI work for almost 9 years now. And it hasn't gotten any easier. It's actually gotten harder, but it's definitely gotten much more relevant to business problems that are out there. And I think that's why.
Yeah, it all starts with educating and understanding people how they're using tools today and what's possible.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed.
All right. Another one in the can. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening if you made it this far. And we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Cool.